In this video, we'll be using Tableau Desktop, a visual analytics program to help make sense of our scouting data. By importing our scouting data into Tableau, we can begin to rapidly visualize our data. The first step towards making these visualizations is setting up the workspace. This video will focus on getting familiar with Tableau and writing calculated fields to find out how many points a robot made automatically. When we open up Tableau, the first thing we see is the landing screen. Most importantly, here are the recent workbooks, and here are the saved data sources. To connect to our data, click up here. In the last video, we set up an Access database to contain scouting data. If you want to follow along with me throughout this series, a full version of that database can be downloaded from the Additional Materials page. Clicking the Access option opens a prompt to find the database we want to connect to. Once we click on the database, Tableau asks us which tables we would like to import our data from. Tableau can import data from as many tables as we need, but for this video, we only need to import our match data. Then, Tableau will ask us how we would like to connect to our data. Tableau can connect to our data live or import all of the data. Selecting Import All has a few advantages. The packaged workbook it creates is great for passing our data to another computer without breaking connections. Also, Tableau won't lock us out of access while we have it open. After we connect to our data, we are presented with the Tableau Interface. The Tableau Interface is essentially a blank canvas for us to drag and drop our data onto. Unlike Excel, we do not have to select a cell range to create a graph. Instead, our data has been divided up into dimensions and measures. Dimensions help us sort and split our data up into categories. In other words, dimensions refers to categorical data. For instance, matches with or without a dead bot. Measures, on the other hand, measure quantitative data that can be subdivided by our dimensions. We can aggregate measures in different ways depending on what we want to learn from them. If we want to change whether Tableau handles a field as a dimension or a measure, we can drag and drop that field to the appropriate window. Let's do this now with the team number and match fields. Now we can begin to answer some questions. Let's start with a simple one. Which team has the best driver on average? To answer that question, let's drag team number to rows and driver skill to columns. When we drag fields onto shelves, Tableau automatically organizes our data based off best practices for data clarity. In this case, it made a bar chart for us. To sort our data, we can use these buttons up here. If we make a mistake, we can go back and forward by using these buttons, or by using Ctrl-Z. This is useful when we are doing a lot of experimentation very quickly. Currently, driver skill is summing up all of our ratings. To get the average driver skill, click on this arrow and change the aggregation from sum to average. Let's resort it. Now we can see that Team 5443 has the best driver on average, receiving a perfect score every time they played. But what if we want to see how many points a team made? Currently, most of our data graphed by itself doesn't show complete information. Most of our fields are simply the number of times that a robot performed that action. If we want to combine these fields to create new data that didn't exist in the original database, we can create a calculated field. Let's start with combining our different autonomous shot fields to figure out how many points our robot scored in autonomous. To create a calculated field, move up to the analysis bar and select Create Calculated Field. We usually start our calculations by inserting all of the fields we are going to use in it. In this case, autonomous 2, 4, and 6 point shots. To insert a field, double-click it. Then we start to convert these fields into points. Every autonomous 2-point shot was worth 2 points, so we multiply it by 2. Every autonomous 4-point shot was worth 4 points, so we multiply it by 4. And so on. Then we add them up. Now that we've made this field, let's go to another workbook where I've already made the fields for teleop and n-score. Let's look at the calculations I've made to see how they are formatted in similar ways. To edit a calculated field, right-click it and select Edit. Notice that telescore follows the same pattern as autonomous score. Field, how many points it's worth, and then add them all up. If we want to make a comment in our code so we can understand it better later, comments can be added by typing words preceded by a double slash. For instance, this is a comment. Notice how the calculation is still valid. That's because everything after the double slash is ignored by Tableau. N-score also follows the same format. Notice that all of these new calculated fields have an equal sign in front of their hash mark. This helps us find our calculated fields later on. Let's make one last calculated field for total score. In Tableau, we can add calculated fields together to create new calculated fields. In this case, total score is simply autonomous score plus telescore plus n-score. This is exactly the same as writing out all of these equations again and totaling them up. Now that we have more calculations, we can start to answer some more advanced questions. A question that everyone likes to know is, who makes the most points a match? To do that, let's drag driver skill onto rows again, and total score onto columns. If we sort it, we will see that Team 5116 has scored the most points this regional, about 403 points overall. If we want to see how many points a team scores per match, we can change the aggregation from sum to average. We can now see that Team 5116 scores about 70 points on average. Therefore, they score about 70 points per match. If we want to see data from more than one field at the same time, we can drag other fields onto shelves. Let's drag driver skill onto a few different shelves to see what happens. When we drag driver skill onto labels, the driver skill appears at the end of each column. If we drag driver skill onto size, columns become fatter as the driver skill increases. If we drag driver skill onto tooltip, we only can see driver skill if we hover over the column. To make the graph we saw at the beginning of this video, drag driver skill to color. This graph is fine, but if we want to increase the contrast, we can change the color palette. Any diverging palette is great for increasing contrast. We can now see total score and driver skill at the same time. Dragging different fields onto shelves is very useful for getting the full picture. If this was a line selection, Team 5873 might be a better pick than Team 5333 based off of Team 5873 having a much better driver. This sort of bar chart takes less than 10 seconds to make and answers a lot of questions we might have about our peers. Because we don't actually have to select the data we are using, making changes is very fluid. In the beginning, we imported all of our data into Tableau instead of connecting live. To refresh our source as new data comes in, right-click it up here, go to Extract, and refresh. If new data had come in, this chart would have refreshed. To avoid having to type out these calculations again in the future, we can save our data source. Saving a data source is different than saving a workbook. When we save a workbook, all of our charts are saved as well as our calculations. However, if we have to start over from scratch again, we have to go through and delete everything. If we just want to save our calculated fields, we should save our data source. To add our data to save data sources, right-click it and select that option. Name it and add it to save data sources. In the future, we won't have to type out every calculated field again. This data source shows up alongside all of the other saved data sources in the landing screen. Anytime we need to quickly answer a question about a team, we can open up the saved data source and start to make some graphs. Thanks for watching.